The Lakers vs. Celtics rivalry of the 1980s was built on history, hatred, and physical confrontation. Every finals match felt like war, not basketball. These teams didn't just want to win, they wanted to dominate each other emotionally. The league's biggest stage amplified every shove, stare, and hard foul. Fans could feel the hostility through the screen. This rivalry carried decades of bitterness from the Russell-Wilt era. By the 1980s, it exploded into open conflict. While Larry Bird and Magic Johnson represented skill and respect, their teammates carried the violence. Boston embraced intimidation as a weapon. Los Angeles responded with pride and retaliation. Games quickly turned physical, especially in the paint. Hard fouls were delivered with intent. Referees struggled to control the chaos. Every possession carried tension. The most infamous moment came during the 1984 NBA Finals. Kevin McHale clotheslined Kurt Rambis midair on a fast break. Rambis crashed hard to the floor, igniting immediate chaos. Players rushed in from both benches, shoving, yelling, and threats filled the court. This wasn't a cheap foul, it was a message. The rivalry crossed a visible line. That moment symbolized Boston's mentality. McHale, Parrish, and Maxwell enforced Celtics' toughness. They believed intimidation was necessary to win championships. The Lakers, known for showtime, were forced to fight back physically. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and James Worthy were targeted repeatedly. The finesse versus force narrative became personal. Skill alone wasn't enough anymore. Robert Parrish became a central enforcer for Boston. His punches on Bill Laimbeer later proved his temperament. But against the Lakers, he was just as physical. Kareem, usually calm, found himself in heated confrontations. Elbows were thrown quietly, fouls were deliberate, respect was replaced by survival. Every game tested restraint. The Lakers weren't innocent either. Michael Cooper and Kurt Rambis embraced the role of agitators. Rambis, in particular, became a lightning rod for Boston's anger. He absorbed hits and kept getting back up. That resilience infuriated the Celtics. Retaliation became inevitable. The rivalry fed itself. Crowds played a role in escalating the feuds. Boston Garden was hostile and unforgiving. Lakers players were booed relentlessly and physically targeted. In Los Angeles, Celtics players faced equal hatred. The arenas felt like battlegrounds. Home court advantage meant emotional warfare. The fans fueled the fire. Despite the chaos, Bird and Magic never lost mutual respect. They competed fiercely, but avoided dirty play. That contrast made the teammates' violence stand out even more. Leadership came in different forms. Bird and Magic carried legacy. Their teammates carried grudges. Together, they created unforgettable tension. Each final series added new wounds. No handshake felt genuine. No rivalry cooled with time. Championships were remembered alongside fights. The McHale Rambis moment became iconic because it reflected the era. Winning required toughness, not just talent. Pain was part of the process. In the end, the 1980s Lakers vs. Celtics rivalry defined NBA intensity. It wasn't just about banners, it was about pride and punishment. The fights, hard fouls, and bench-clearing chaos made history real. This rivalry didn't just shape careers. It shaped the league's identity, and it remains the gold standard for basketball hatred. Bill Russell vs. Wilt Chamberlain was where the Lakers-Celtics war truly began. Long before Bird and Magic, before McHale and Rambis, these two giants turned basketball into a battleground. Their rivalry in the 1960s wasn't just about stats or wins, it was about dominance, pride, and psychological control. Every match felt personal. The tension between Boston and Los Angeles was forged through them. What later became open fights had its roots here. Their battles were brutally physical by today's standards. Russell and Wilt collided in the paint on nearly every possession. Elbows, forearms, and shoves were constant. Referees allowed contact that would be flagrant fouls now. Both men absorbed punishment without complaint. The game demanded toughness, and they delivered it nightly. While there was no famous bench clearing fist fight between them, near explosions happened often. Tempers flared after hard fouls and aggressive rebounds. Teammates and officials frequently stepped in to prevent escalation. The restraint made the rivalry even more intense. Violence hovered just beneath the surface. Control, not chaos, defined. Their clashes. The contrast between Russell and Wilt mirrored what fans later saw in Bird vs. Magic. Wilt was overwhelming power and individual brilliance. Russell was strategy, leadership, and sacrifice. Wilt chased dominance through scoring and strength. Russell chased victory through defense and intelligence. This clash of philosophies divided fans and cities. Russell also mastered psychological warfare, a trait later adopted by Celtics enforcers in the 1980s. He baited Wilt, questioned his toughness, and challenged his focus. Russell understood that beating Wilt mentally mattered as much as stopping him physically. This approach became part of Boston's identity. Intimidation without losing control. Wilt, on the other hand, carried the emotional weight of the rivalry. Hard fouls frustrated him, and Russell knew it. Wilt rarely retaliated fully, fearing his strength could cause serious harm. That restraint was misunderstood as softness by critics. The media magnified this narrative. The rivalry extended beyond the court. Their teammates absorbed and reflected this tension. Celtics and Lakers players often clashed defending their stars. The rivalry became team-wide, not just individual. Every playoff series added bitterness. Every loss felt personal. This environment normalized physical retaliation. By the time the 1980s arrived, hostility was tradition. Championship outcomes deepened the divide. Russell's Celtics consistently defeated Wilt's teams in critical moments. Winning gave Boston moral authority. Losing intensified Los Angeles resentment. These results hardened attitudes on both sides. Success and failure shaped identity. Hatred became inherited. This inherited hostility explains why the 1980 for McHale clothesline felt inevitable. It wasn't an isolated act, it was a historical echo. The Celtics had always believed in intimidation. The Lakers had always been targets. Decades of rivalry resurfaced in one violent moment. History repeated itself. In the end, Russell versus Wilt was the foundation of NBA rivalry culture. They proved that dominance creates conflict, even without fists flying. Their battles taught the league that physicality and pride could define eras. The fights of the 1980s were simply the next chapter, and it all began with two giants colliding in silence. Key story of Bill Russell and Wilt Chamberlain reminds us that NBA rivalries don't start with fights. They start with dominance. Their battles were quiet, controlled, and relentless. Every collision in the paint carried meaning. What they built in the 1960s became the emotional blueprint for everything that followed. Rivalries were no longer just competitive, they were personal. Russell versus Wilt showed the league that winning and greatness don't always look the same. One chased championships, the other chased supremacy. That contrast fueled frustration, debate, and resentment. Fans chose sides, cities chose identities. The rivalry expanded beyond the court into culture. Basketball was becoming war. As decades passed, the emotions never disappeared, they were inherited. Celtics and Lakers players who came later didn't need explanations. They felt the weight the moment they put on the jersey. Hard fouls weren't random, they were tradition. Respect was secondary to dominance. History demanded toughness. By the time the 1980s arrived, the rivalry had teeth. McHale's clothesline wasn't an accident, it was history resurfacing. Rambis wasn't just a player, he was a symbol. The fight was bigger than the moment. It was decades of unfinished business colliding under bright lights.